So, Tanya really needs no introduction, but for those of you who don't know her, her name is Tanya Breyer. She is a CNBC host and executive producer for her series, and you have got a special guest and lots to talk about. So
I do.
A round of applause, please, for Tanya.
Thank you so much. Emma, thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. I'm thrilled to be part of CNBC's Sustainable Future Forum. Please now welcome His Serene Highness, Prince Albert II of Monaco. Your Serene Highness, hello. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being part of our Sustainable Future Forum. And of course, we're here at COP28, where we're hoping a lot of action will get done. What's so interesting?
I hope so as well.
I know.
We all do.
What's so interesting, Your Serene Highness, is that the oceans have not really been part of the global dialogue until recently at these COP meetings. Why do you think that is?
I know it's always surprising to me and to a lot of other people that oceans seem to have been not only forgotten, but the lack of understanding of the role, the importance, and the role of oceans in not only being a carbon sink, temperature regulator, the incredible biodiversity that are in marine life and in the ocean, and the economic value of different ecosystems that provide us food, also in pharmaceuticals or in cosmetics or in a lot of different areas, and you know, people just seem to put that aside, and the importance as a climate regulator. Both polar regions, you know, are so important for the regulation of our climate, and because these different ecosystems and different parts of the world are not in balance anymore, and it's our ocean is becoming, unfortunately, very unhealthy in terms of what it can provide. Well, then that's why we have so many problems. And so to make that link, and it was absolutely crucial to make that link between ocean and climate. And thankfully, what happened? Is this on? What, you want me to start all over again? Is that it? I was on a roll. Come on. No, and the fact that at COP21, finally that was recognized, and there was a special sessions for the ocean. There was a special day for ocean. This year it'll be on the 9th of November. And unfortunately, I have to go back and do some other work. But there were a lot of special sessions. There's now an ocean pavilion, you know, in the expo area, and so there are very significant advances. And also, what I forgot to say is that we were able, also in Monaco, to in 2019 we were because we initiated that report. There was a special report by the IPCC on the oceans and the cryosphere, and that really was the first time that a serious study had been made on the importance of oceans and climate. And so it's absolutely crucial that be the same, or that can be in other COPs, that we will have more data, more research being done every day by hundreds or thousands of scientists around the world that are working on these issues, and I hope that finally the public at large will recognize that.
As you've said, there is an ocean pavilion here. So much more awareness about the crucial role of oceans. What have you yourself seen and heard here so far that is making you feel encouraged?
Well, there are different initiatives that that have been launched. I was yesterday at a session announcing the UN Ocean Conference that will be the next UN Ocean Conference that will be in Nice in 2025. Just to mention, we will be hosting also in Monaco, because it's just a few kilometers down the road, a special day on the blue economy. So on everything to do with financing of different blue economy projects. And so that's absolutely vital also that these types of conferences are held between COP meetings, and then we will be able to see also what advances have been made. But I think what is important is that we also bring together innovators and entrepreneurs and the investors into these, and that they get to talk together to come up with some great new ideas of how to improve these ecosystems, these marine ecosystems, and how they can help ocean health in general. I won't get into the detail, but that we created an Ocean Innovators platform with my foundation and other stakeholders, and that seems to be and they had several sessions here already, and that seems to be working and progressing very well.
Of course, you launched your foundation in 2006. What are some of the key missions that you've achieved so far?
Well, the foundation was set up in 2006 because I felt it was the right vehicle to address certain urgencies that I was seeing, and the state of our planet was already showing incredible signs of deterioration, and so we focus on different areas, on different parts of the planet, developing countries, on water issues, on biodiversity issues, be them on land or at sea, and of course climate change and anything to do with climate change. So we've already been able to be part of or initiated more than 780 projects around the world, and with total grants totaling 110 million euros. So it's not as big as some other foundations. We don't claim to be the biggest one or the best one, but because we work in partnerships with a lot of other great organizations and institutions, and I hope that we have been able to make some headway in a lot of these issues. But it was also to because planetary health is vital for us and for our future, and so we just wanted not just to be another player out there, but we wanted to be active on the ground and be able to engage with scientists and help the process along.
May I ask you, Your Serene Highness, where did your own passion come from to make a difference? We've talked many times before. I've had the privilege of talking to you, and you've talked to me about your parents and the values that they gave you. And of course, Prince Albert I dedicated his life to oceanography and exploration as well.
No, absolutely. That's an incredible legacy to have. Prince Albert I, the creator of the Oceanographic Museum in Monaco. Although he wasn't a scientist by training, but he was able to engage and to surround himself with some brilliant scientists at the time. And it was really at the beginnings of oceanography. Yeah. It was a new science back then, but he was an incredible adventurer. He loved for the sea and for his curiosity for different sciences. Helped him, and he helped others also to engage in these areas. And so his legacy is incredible, and his vision. If you look at his writings from the early part of the 20th century, he was concerned about the same issues that we're concerned of today about. He was talking about overfishing back then, which no one really would ever think of.
Yes.
And then, of course, yes, my parents were very instrumental in opening our eyes, my sisters and my eyes to the natural world, to the Mediterranean, to just making sure that we understood the importance of nature and that we are part of nature, and we're not that much better than other species. Well, we have certain features that make us, talk and engage in different ways. But no, that humans are part of nature, and that we cannot survive without nature. And so, yes, that all played its part, of course, in my engagement. But it's just my travels and my being in different circumstances and meeting different people has, not only spurred my interest, but made me better aware of the situation. And what was really an eye-opener was accompanying my father to the Earth Summit in 1992 in Rio, and that was the first, first time that I really heard not only leaders but scientists, warn us about that the Earth's vital signs were starting to fail, and so it took us it is taking us a long time to address a lot of these issues, just because the business as usual model is comfortable, and we have to, it's a big switch to make, but we have to make these switches, and we have to make those adaptations and those efforts of, now that we know what's going on, and now that we've heard the evidence, we've seen the data, we have to act.
How important do you think it is to invest in the blue economy and, of course, to finance innovations?
I think it's vitally important because there are solutions that do exist out there, but they need they can't grow if there's no financial backing, and if there's no incentive to develop these strategies and these innovations. And so that's why it's important to have all the stakeholders come together and to have the scientists talk to entrepreneurs, talk to different investors, but also, of course, you need the political will and power to have the right legislations also. And so it's really, no one can do this alone. Be it on land or at sea, we all have to work together to make progress.
How worried are you for your children's and their children's future?
Well, I'm actually very worried because if we don't make significant headway very soon, not only we will suffer in a few years' time, or start suffering even more, but the next generations will have an incredibly hard time to survive in a lot of areas, a lot of regions in our planet. So it's really not only extremely worrying, but seeing that there's such slow progress and such lack of willpower or determination to move things at a faster pace. And so we have to, that there is still that small window, that very short window of time that we have to, in which we can act, and we have to act, not only for us, but for the generations that will follow us.
Just finally, just finally, Your Serene Highness, what is your message here at COP28 to governments, leaders, scientists, the private sector, individuals?
Because the stock taking at this COP is one of the features, it is not only time to take stock on what we've done and where we are, but where we would like to go and where we have to go. And I hope that there will be some very strong commitments on the way forward. Thankfully, Monaco, we're on the road to reaching our goals, but we're only a very small player on this field. And so I really hope that the big players will finally step up to the plate and hit some home runs. If we want to put it in sports terms, we need some home runs here. And so they really have, but everybody has to. Everybody has to go beyond their initial commitments because the time is short and the window of opportunity is closing fast. And this COP has to be, we almost say that at every COP, but this one really is extremely important. And we have to show those strong commitments.
Your Serene Highness, thank you so much for joining us at CNBC's Sustainable Future Forum here today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
To the stage now, Mr. Steve Sedgwick. You all know who he is, and his fantastic panelists. A round of applause, please, for Steve. He deserves it. Well done.
Thank you, Em. Look, there is no doubt about it. The two panels that I'm privileged to conduct here today, they dovetail beautifully. They are very much specific, aren't they? We're aspiring to the let's get right to the root of the situation here. We are in the UAE, is one of the biggest oil producers on the planet. It is, of course, a key OPEC member as well. And we know there has been criticism about holding COP28 here in the UAE. But there are many of us who believe that if we are going to have a successful energy transition, every key stakeholder needs to be at the table. And it's very interesting. I've spoken to many of the key stakeholders from that industry. And indeed from the renewable industry already. I've conducted some in the region of 60-odd interviews so far as well here in Dubai. And everybody needs to take part in this, and we need every cent for the transition as well. I've got a great panel for you in a few moments' time, but what I thought I'd do is give you just another scene-setting video for about 3 minutes, and it also gives me an excuse to get my panel on stage during that as well. So please watch the explainer video.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
And it's not just Trump. Open climate change skeptics such as Russian President Vladimir Putin and Hungary's Viktor Orban grab headlines with their denials. But Earth.org lists other world leaders that it accuses of paying lip service to environmental targets while their countries emit more carbon than ever before. 40 nations face general elections in 2024, so it's no wonder the cost of a green transition is being debated on the campaign trail.
With the combination of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act and the CHIPS and Science Act, we've invested more than $50 billion so far in climate resilience.
But while some administrations tout successes, others are promising a different route, maintaining their environmental targets, but in a way that will address energy security and limit the transition cost to the consumer.
When it comes to our energy security, we're still going to need oil and gas. 25% of our energy will come from oil and gas, even in 2050. Far better that we get that from here at home. Better for the economy, better for our energy security, better for jobs, and better for climate emissions rather than shipping it here from halfway around the country. So that's why we've got more North Sea oil and gas licenses being announced.
Can leaders following different routes to net zero agree? After a year of no talks, China and the U.S. recently promised closer cooperation to tackle climate change. But there were no specific cuts to emissions tabled, nor any firm commitment to phase out fossil fuels. In 2015, 195 countries signed the Paris Accord, but the UN warned that some are not on track to meet their goals, and according to Climate Action Tracker, current policies could result in a 2.7-degree rise in emissions by the end of the century. And that's why gatherings such as COP28 are so crucial. Will countries do more to phase out fossil fuels, and can a new climate damage fund for the Global South be agreed? That's all on the line unless countries put aside their differences and unite against the global common fight.
Right, and as Emma's been saying to you all day, this, as well as you, very privileged live audience as well, this event is being live streamed on all the CNBC International pages, LinkedIn, YouTube, X, and others. Right, okay, let's get straight into this because we've got about 37 minutes with this excellent panel as well. I'll just tell you who's on stage with me here. Angela Wilkinson is the Secretary General of the World Energy Council. Lovely to see you as ever, Angela. Bob Dudley is a man I've had the privilege to know for 13 years. He is the chairman of the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative and formerly, of course, the CEO of BP. Delighted to meet for the first time Hela Shekruhu, who is the Vice President, Middle East, Central Asia, Turkey, Afghanistan and Pakistan over at the International Finance Corporation. Lovely to meet you. And Walid Shetter as well. Again, first time I've met you, sir, as well. President, Middle East and Africa over at Schneider Electric as well. Look, just like we did on finance in the last panel, I just want to stock take our own GST, as I said before, on where we are in the energy transition. And I'll just work my way down the line. And after that, we'll ask some very specific questions. I will remind the panel that the best panels are the ones where the audience can't hear me too much, so if anyone hears anything, Bob knows this, he's done more panels with me than he'd like to remember. By all means, just jump in and get involved or let me know. And the same goes for you all. If you hear anything you really want to talk about, please let me know. Angela, let's do our global stock take. How sits the energy transition? We know we're off target for sub 2%, but are things as bad as they look?
So I started my career in climate and energy over 40 years ago. In those days, we used to talk about scenarios that ranged from 2 degrees to 12 degrees centigrade. Now we're much tighter on the temperature ranges, but we're also much clearer on the momentum challenge, that actually climate momentum is moving faster than we're removing the inertia in a very big energy system. The world energy system no longer fit for purpose. What does it take to change it? A lot of positive messages coming out about commitments across the board. The tap of finance is flowing. Methane, net zero methane. We've got lots of countries committing. But commitment's not the same as implementation. And implementation is the challenge. So just where am I on stock take? Our most pre-COP survey, very clear, last opportunity for a significant course correction by the majority of respondents. However, only 11% believe that they have achieved critical mass of participation in their countries to make this energy transition happen faster and fairer. And a worrying 24% feel that there is a passive, silent majority not engaging.
Angela, before I move on to Bob and Hela and Walid as well, something you just said there is quite extraordinary. The path that we are looking at with the UN scenarios is just circa 3%, 2.8, 2.9, depending on which numbers you use and what time frame as well. But you said we've taken down the top end of concerns in the years when you've been looking at it, down dramatically. Does that represent some significant progress or not really?
Well, it's progress in climate modelling and
Right,
science.
okay, so it's the modelling that's improved rather than the actions have taken the top end down.
Yeah, the natural rate of decarbonisation hasn't shifted very much. In fact, we haven't decarbonised anything yet. What we've managed to do is build out more renewable capacity, which is meeting the growing demand. But we are going to have a much bigger energy system by 2050. Half of that is going to be electrified. We hope 100% of that will be renewable electrified. That means there's still 0.5% needs to be net zero.
And I will just follow up, because I think it's significantly the most important point at the root of why we're all here. If the modelling has improved so much to take down the top-end scenario so aggressive rather than decarbonisation, is there a possibility, as if there are sceptics out there, I don't think there's any in this room, but if there are sceptics out there say, actually the modelling is still wrong, is it likely that the modelling will improve that actually mean that our worst-case scenarios at the moment aren't going to happen? No.
I think climate science is platinum-plated
right,
science.
Okay. So we're there now.
It's held up to a higher degree of scrutiny than any other form of science in the world, and it makes the grade. We are on track for overshoot of 1.5 degrees. That means that the climate adaptation challenge becomes
No, I just want to confirm that, because what an extraordinary change. Bob, we can talk about big energy, big oil and gas specifically in a few moments' time, but in terms of your stock take on where we're at now compared to where we started on this whole process.
Well, I think if you look at where we are in the energy transition, and the low-hanging fruit that we must do fast and quick is methane reduction. It's going to make the biggest difference. I chair the Oil and Gas Climate Initiative. 12 of the largest countries in the world have reduced their methane emissions by 40% in 5 years. So there's real practical action that's happening with them, and then try to be leaders now for the industry around the globe. We're not there. We have so much more to do, but people need to realize the vast sheer size and scale of the world's energy system seems to be beyond the grasp of many people who just want oil and gas to disappear overnight. We've got to bring it down and come up with the renewables, not just renewables. Nuclear has got to be a big part of it. We've got to do it sensibly, because if you turn off oil and gas, the world will not do very well. Am I optimistic? I am so pleased that finally the COP has allowed energy companies to attend, because there's no way we're going to solve this energy transition without the energy, the capital, the engineering, and the vast knowledge of the energy companies to bring the emissions down. And yesterday we signed a big agreement, and it's not just words, not just targets, it's commitments.
It's another acronym, Bob. It's the OGDC, isn't it? Which even one of the senior people from the oil community had to say to me they didn't know what the acronym meant.
Well, it was they've changed it like 4 times, but Oil and Gas Decarbonization Accelerator, and then they finally dropped the decarbonization. It's the Oil and Gas Charter.
Yeah, I've got there eventually. Yeah. Look, in terms of, and this is something that you've fought for, and goodness knows you and I met outside of the Blue Zone perimeter in Paris in 2015. I remember you and Patrick Pouyanné and I debating on this one. Is the move on bringing the big oil and gas players into the big tent, is it bearing fruit so far at this meeting?
Already it has. Before, we spent a year working out that charter, which was 12 companies, and before COP, we have 50 energy companies from around the world have signed up for that. So OGCI has tried to be a leader, and the number of companies that have joined, number of national oil companies who have joined and signed on to that, and the methane reduction, there will be nowhere to hide with methane, because satellites, aircraft, drones, ground sensors, there's going to be nowhere to hide. And so companies are now realizing they have to.
Before Hella and Walid come in, Andrew, did you want to come in on this one?
I would just say you're exactly right. We really have to address methane. The industry has also been, as the oil and gas industry has also been slow in addressing it, and it has to take account of how it builds this momentum and the credibility going forward. I did the first LiDAR monitoring of methane emissions from the gas system, I think, about in the 1980s. So we know it's been a problem. We now have technologies that address it, and there's great momentum being built by Bob and this consortium.
Can I just add to what you said there? Think about it. Until about 5 years ago, you couldn't see methane, you couldn't smell it, People working in the field didn't even know it was happening around them. Infrared technology, satellites, drones, all of that have changed this now. And that's why it was kind of difficult to get people's attention on it.
And I'll come in as well, because I've been following the methane and various gas tech conferences and oil and gas conferences for a very long time. And some of the great advocates, someone like Martin Wetzler, formerly of Shell, now at CEP, so I bumped into him yesterday. We had to hug, he was so excited about it. And yet I also had a very long interview with Darren Woods, the CEO of Exxon yesterday, someone who would, up until I think the AGM in May, was saying, no, we can't do this. We don't have the right technology. It is not the right time. So this is, I think it's quite seismic. And again, I'm trying not to be naive and I'm trying not to be overexcited because I'm too old for all that and I'm certainly cynical enough. Actually, I will just ask Hella and Wally, before I bring you in about your stock take, and I want your stock takes as well, how do you both feel about big oil and gas being in the tent here as well? Hella, because you cover a lot of amazing regions in the world that are suffering the problems of our addiction to oil and gas over the centuries.
So I am, like Bob, really excited about the commitment to stop the leakages and emissions of methane. We recently did a deep dive, my team did, in my region about oil and gas and coal methane emissions, and we did it particularly more advanced in Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. And even the international oil companies who did well under the Kazakh policy over 10 years to reduce flaring, they were not reducing venting, which is the leakages, because of what Bob was saying. So, and knowing that when we look at the first 20 years, 1 ton of methane is equivalent to 84 tons of CO2, it's one of the few, maybe the only thing that can in a very noticeable manner, slow down the global warming. So it is definitely an important step. Like Angela, I want us to move to implementation, and that's where we, the World Bank Group, and including IFC, we are there to support implementation. And history has shown us that whether national or international oil companies, as long as the regulator doesn't force them to, they do not go to the best environmental standards. So that's where we use the fact that we as World Bank Group have the dialogue with the governments and with the private sector. We have the tools to help both crack down this issue of one of the most dangerous greenhouse gases.
It comes to the importance of policy to ensuring that this happens in a few months' time. But also, there's a lady there from NVIDIA, previously of NVIDIA, who was talking about AI as well. So we talk about the sensors, we talk about the drones, we talk about the flyovers, but also the technology for AI as well. Quite phenomenal now. Talking of technology, Waleed, your company has deployed vast amounts of technology to digitize and improve the way we withdraw energy from the globe as well. Just on this methane announcement, did you want to, because I personally think it's stunningly significant.
In fact, I would like even to draw the light on the other aspect of it, because we speak about supply, but maybe we don't speak enough about demand, which is half of the emissions potential reduction, and there you can implement the technology. There you can easily go to quick wins to reduce the impact or the CO2 emissions. For example, when you speak about buildings, you must know that 39% of the world emissions are coming from buildings wherever you are. And you can reduce that by technology. The technology can address quite easily now, today, with the recent technologies and AI and big data that you can gather around these installations. You can implement very rapidly technology solutions that are bankable, by the way, to give a solution to the demand to be reduced, so that supply can have an easier task.
Definitely. I mean, I would like to see more conversations about users, uses and demand-driven solutions and user-centric systems. We spend most of our conversations, even here at COP, 90% of the time talking about the supply of money or the supply of technologies or the supply of resources. And actually, I'd say it's bigger than 50% of the system is out of the room. As I said, our most recent survey shows less than 11% critical mass of participation.
What we can all do, it was shown, again, I mentioned it previously, but this devastating war on the European continent, how amazing that we did find conservation when we needed to, because we were concerned about supply.
I think that, there's a lot of conversations about reducing demand. I mean, I think the goal of doubling energy efficiency, as systemic energy efficiency as well. That means it could be 90% efficiency in some places, but overall, really important. But not everywhere. We have to remember that there are 6 billion people. It's not just 3 billion or energy poverty users. There are billions of better lives which are going to need a lot more energy to come, and we need to make sure that those new uses are as efficient as possible.
Which is a great point to come back to Hella actually as well, with your stock take on just where we're at, because this isn't just about the rich corporations and the wealthy nations, it's about the entire world.
Yes, and even in that, I think there are some very promising avenues. So if we want to see how to implement, going to implementation of this doubling of energy efficiency, which IPCC has been calling for a long time, or basically achieving the global pledge on cooling, because we are in a warming world. And we have to remember, the numbers we are talking about are averages of the planet, right? So when we say this year we exceeded 2 degrees in certain days, and we exceeded 1.5 degrees for many days, it means in some places it was double or triple. And that leads to massive damages and livelihood lost. So energy efficiency becomes essential, especially for low-income country. I remember many years ago, the Minister of Energy of Uganda told me the cheapest megawatt of electricity I install is the one I don't have to, because of energy efficiency. The financing of energy efficiency has been tricky because it requires aggregation of small investments, which is why at the World Bank Group we have been working with the banks in IFC to give them lines of credit for green financing. And we have a fantastic program called EDGE, which is about energy efficiency in buildings, and we also have the cities programs. So what is new recently, even progress after the last couple of years when conservation of energy became more important, is that the world is waking up to the potential of the surface or shallow geothermal. You may be aware that the US and Europe are going big time on that. And in my region, my team is finalizing the studies, and it's very promising. So again, if a country like Kazakhstan, instead of now investing in new, or Turkey, now investing in natural gas distribution networks, which we know for residential is not economically viable, requires subsidy to invest in this new gas infrastructure. Instead, you could do geothermal, much better than gas for heating and cooling, for some industrial application, for some of the big consumers. And it's much less risky than using geothermal for electricity. So there are promising solutions.
Angela.
40 years ago, I was doing a break-even calculation between how much gas did you have to lose from the system before it wiped out the coal advantage, and trying to get a conversation going about why did we burn a premium fuel like gas in a power station when we could actually heat directly with it. And I think this is the bit. Not everything can be electrified. Let's electrify as much as possible, but let's not forget the other types of energy that's needed and who it's for and what it's for. Doesn't often get talked about. We tend to talk about resources, good or bad, technologies, what will win. That's not the right conversation.
Wally, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's also about how we consume the energy and how we distribute it. So the traditional way of having a mega grid that is distributing electricity across continents and countries could be also rethought. So when we speak about microgrids in Africa, in some of the regions where we don't have a mega grid that is yet implemented, today the technology enables us to make sure that we have these little islands that can be connected, but where you reduce the amount of waste of electricity, I would say. And what used to be in the past something non-attainable is today enabled by the technology. You could do it. It can be bankable. It can be financially viable to implement a microgrid at a city, at even a hotel or a factory in a place that is not used to get the grid up to the place where the consumption is.
I think it's important as we sit here in one of the most beautiful cities in the world, in Dubai, and it is, and all of us on the panel here, including our moderator, we come from the rich Western world. We need to keep in mind that there's nearly 1 billion people who do not have access to electricity. 600 million people don't have access to clean cooking fuel. They burn wood or cow dung. And being able to use something like natural gas, and the emissions from that are enormous. So the ability to take gas, put put it in the hands of people. It doesn't have to be electrified, but that alone would greatly reduce emissions. And we have a responsibility not to just think about, where we all come from. That size of that problem is unbelievably large.
The common phrase is there's no one size fits all. So why do we keep looking for one? Let's understand that actually there's a diversity of solutions, there's a diversity of needs. We need to look at the smaller, not just we're not looking for great big levers. We're probably looking for hundreds of thousands of smaller steps and seeds that can be planted everywhere to make this transition happen.
That's exactly what your organisation is designed to do, isn't it? Look at micro solutions as well as the big top-down solutions, isn't it?
Yes, we need to work at all the levels, and also remember that the developing countries are where the demographics are growing steadily and the population is very young. So when choosing your energy mix, you have to also think, is this the energy mix that will allow me as a policymaker to offer good jobs and dignity jobs for the people? And that's why, for instance, a solution like geothermal for heating and cooling is a superior way of decarbonizing your system, because more than half of energy usage is not electricity, right? Because it creates a lot of jobs, and the same skills that oil and gas requires can be fine-tuned and refined to do the geothermal application for heating and cooling. You know that you may have heard about heat pumps as being a revolution. So the geothermal heat pumps on closed loop is very, very good and very helpful now that countries that didn't used to need to be heated need to be heated. Those who didn't used to need cooling now need cooling. So we need to do it in a cost-effective way. And because it has to be at different levels, when it's at small level, at residential level, we have to work through the local banking sector. You need aggregators. When it's a bigger, like an airport, a big consumer of electricity, you can do direct application or energy for these utilizations of energy.
Support there, again, we can talk about the rich world solutions, but is the support there for these bottom-up micro solutions? That seems to me where there are the potential biggest barriers in A, finding the capital, and B, getting the technology on site to these nations that desperately need it.
So the technology is not the issue, neither for methane abatement nor for geothermal. The technology exists. It's more how to have a well-coordinated action and planning
so it's
and
bad
implementation.
Policy, bad politics.
It's about making sure that you have the right permitting framework, for instance, to be able to dig that hole in your house to do the closed-loop geothermal. Is that you have the local manufacturer SMEs to do the various parts of the pump. So it's really, you have to look at it holistically. The human capital, the regulatory at the refined level. So because and then of course the upfront capital needed for a solution that is clean tends to be, on average, the capex upfront is higher. So that's why you need blended finance and additional.
Helen, I thought that the word methane was controversial, but after 4 days here, I think the word permitting is even more frustrating for you from the traditional oil and gas sector. I don't know about for Schneider trying to get stuff done, but certainly for the renewable players, they are tearing their hair out sometimes. And I speak to some of the most amazing ladies and gentlemen in that industry. They're just saying, let's change the permitting and the regulation, and we can really make a difference as well. So it comes down to policy, Angela.
And market design. But you also then have to think about who is going to benefit and what energy uses are needed and what difference does this energy make. So affordability is a big question across the world at the moment. We have to stop talking about the price of units of technology. That's part of the conversation. We've got system costs we have to bear, but you've also got to have value in use at the end. So what is it that the end user needs energy for that allows them to produce some form of surplus capital, that allows them to pay for their energy? We take this conversation in the most paternalistically well-intentioned way of saying, how do we change the system for 10 billion people, but we won't ask them what they want to use energy for. We won't ask them what their needs are. We won't ask them what the affordability challenges are.
Okay, so I'm going to get myself in trouble here, Angela.
Yeah.
Don't we know what people want energy for? Don't we know that they want to be able to heat their homes, cook their food, grow their crops and help that and transport those crops as well? sorry, I know that's paternalistic,
So
and I'm setting myself up here, Heather, I know, but
Yeah.
aren't these the things that
But
people
there's a
want?
different portfolios of uses in different places.
Yeah.
So when you're designing for that portfolio of
Helen's
use
the right
and
person to
thinking
answer
about
this,
what it
not
means.
me, sorry.
No, we're on the same page.
Yes, we are on the same page that, and that's something we in the whole world of development finance, the concept of country-driven systems. We have to listen to the developing countries. They know what they need. We're not the ones who tell them the solutions they should adopt. Instead, what we can do as World Bank, as IFC, is look around the world, what seems to be working, and look case by case where it applies the best, and just have a conversation with the authorities and with the private sector, and to see, as I said, the whole implementation, what it requires. So if you try to roll out a type of renewable, you know that recently even there are aspects of behavioral economics. For instance, France has excellent potential for wind, but the French people don't want to see the windmills, so the politicians would not put it, because you cannot impose on people an energy mix that they do not accept.
And yet, the French people, and I love them dearly, I worked with them for many years, for a French bank as well, they don't want higher prices, and yet they don't want they can't not want everything and get what they want at the same time.
Yeah,
working for one of the biggest French corporates in the world. No, actually, I was actually going to ask you about the local solutions and how Schneider works on local solutions. Then Bob will come in on this as well.
I want to jump in, because for that to work, beside the regulation, which is a topic, of course, and beside the price point, of course, that is supporting our projects of energy efficiency. But there is one important element, which is to respond to what the customer or the user or the city is needing, and we need to be adaptive. That is for sure. So one of them, for example, is that many of our customers want to do the transition, but they don't want to pay upfront for the capex. So they are looking for fund, yes, but they are looking for a developer that would provide them this energy as green energy per kilowatt hour, not on their balance sheet. That is very concrete, down to earth. The way we solve that is that we partner with institutions or developers or investors, like, for example, Alpha Structure or Green Structure that we created in the US, where we do provide that. So it's a mix of solutions between batteries, solar, microgrid, but also storage and trading of energy to provide the full net zero. And we have concrete examples on that in Montgomery County that wants, for example, all its buses fleet to be net zero. And the solution in that case is that you use the batteries of the buses to store it in the evening, etc. And you reach the net zero by providing this county with this solution. Of course, they did have a problem of capex, so we went the extra mile to provide them with a complete solution, including the fact that they are going to buy their installation.
And as you said earlier, the finance and the energy demands of these people, you can't separate them as well. There probably aren't many people on this planet who have done more deals with governments and regions than Bob Dudley, going in, looking at the energy needs, looking at what the customer wants, and how to partnership as well. Bob, just on that point, Angela was making the point, and Heather was backing up this, we don't always ask these people what they want the energy for as well. What's your experience on this?
I think broadly, people, what they want, what energy does is provides heat, light, and mobility. Break it down. That's what people want, and that's what they need. I'll tell you, I'm going to go back to your permitting point, because I'll tell you a heartwarming story. When Russia invaded Ukraine, and the Russians shut off 40–50% of the gas to Ukraine, and the pipelines were gone, Germany was worried about the lights going out for their people. And we talk about the efficient response to this. So they needed natural gas. They were worried about not having the ability to provide light and heat. So they had a natural gas regasification plant planned for the north of Germany on the water that was supposed to come on stream in 2027. It came on in 2022.
Yeah, I know.
So I went and talked to one of the ministers. I said, well, how do you do that? I mean, I've never heard any company could ever accelerate like that. What did you do? And off the record, he said, well, we changed the public comment period from 5 years to 5 days.
Can I come back, because I know this story from a different point of view. And It is heartwarming because they got stuff done really quickly.
Yeah.
But I spoke to somebody who's a very senior gentleman in the renewables industry about this, and he was tearing his hair out about the exact same story. And he said, I just wish they had basically reduced my permitting period for my turbines from 5 years to 5 days, and I could have given the Germans exactly the same amount of power. I hear what you're saying, action, and that's great policy. If you want to get something done, you can do it quickly. But you can see the frustrations from the renewable industry. So we could, and whether he's right or not, this gentleman said, I'll tell you it wasn't disagree because it was on CNBC. It was the CEO of Vestas, and he said, I could have done that.
Well, I agree with that. That still would not have come close to solving the problem if the lights were going on.
But he's still got the same permitting problem for a different technology.
Yeah.
But what is permitting?
Bob, then answer, sorry.
So look at the UK. You've got renewable solar developments, offshore wind, sitting around, done, for 2 or 3 years, waiting for the permit to connect into the grid. I mean, these things should not happen. So there's a lot that could be done here. And as the world warms, policymakers are going to have to get real about the permitting problem across all forms of energy.
So I'm back to my original stats, which is 90% of people aren't actively engaged in this, and 24% are passively against it, or silent majority. So we've got to change the story. We're still telling stories of technology, of money, of licensing. What you have to do is help people understand their role and their choices in energy transition. So we've been humanizing energy transition stories across the world so that people and communities, when you put in a transmission pipeline, you've got multiple communities who all want to know what's in it for them, right?
But how great, though. How great that actually people, if you'd have asked them in that 5-day period, they would have said, yeah, keep the lights on. And they would have, I don't know what the numbers are, and I don't want to speak for Germany, but I reckon they would have said, yeah, let's go for it.
But if you want to continue, if you want that to be the solution, then it's late lessons from early warnings, and we only need to get to 5 days from crisis before we can act. I want a different type of
A senior Italian politician told me once that that's the only way his country works.
Well.
So I haven't seen any evidence yet in my 20 years of working in the country of it being any different from that as well. But good policy. Let's move on, because we've got 7 minutes left on it. Yeah, by all means, Bob.
Footnote to what Angela said. You think about this point. Most of the people in the world are not involved in this. They believe that electricity comes from hitting a switch on the wall. They don't even think about, does that electricity come from a coal plant? And 60% of Chinese electricity comes from coal. It's also the greatest renewable country in the world. I mean, they're doing everything. But if people don't get involved and think about how they're using energy, we're going to have a hard time.
And indeed, we talk about micro solutions. I know more than one person who is stunningly excited looking at how much energy they're putting back in the grid from their solar panels. It's become a bit of an obsession. People can get really engaged, can't they, if they think they're putting something in and they're doing it in the right way.
Absolutely. Just to comment on the fact that we need to engage people to move on. Remember what happened when COVID came? We were not acquainted to hold Teams meeting and meetings on digital, and we're doing that. We tipped it in 1 week. We were all adapted. So I believe that the COP is a great electroshock because it reminds the world, it reminds the people that we have a problem, and I believe that this can, with time, I hope not too much time, tip the opinion of people toward, I will stop thinking about it as a theoretical topic and acting on it.
I do want to bring in Ira very briefly because I didn't get it into the last conversation, and I just think that it is stunning what a very, very aggressive policy can do for change, and in all kinds of ways. And one thing from my conversation with the oil and gas industry here that I've realised in a lot of research is actually, yes, they're very excited about what they're doing in terms of methane, but there's a big stick in IRA as well. There is some serious dollar fines, $900 going out to $1,500. I think it's per unit released after a certain period of time. Good policy can galvanise. We talked about the 5-day permitting in Germany, but actually good policy can just be such a galvanising force. So the importance of policy married to the energy companies doing the right thing, the oil companies doing the right thing as well. So policy. Tell us a little bit. Someone tell me about how they feel about the policy and what the leaders here can do, rather than just having dare I say it, some coming in and out within a couple of hours. Are you seeing better policy from anyone?
Yeah. So policy is a system, right? It's a design of it's rules of engagement and how we all participate in a system. That's what policy is. There are policies. Governments are really poor at the moment at joining up the dots between different policies. So we have the trilemma framework: energy security, affordability and equity, and environmental sustainability. You've got to have a policy framework which is integrated. You have to have policy pathfinding, which is experimental innovation. Not everything that worked in the past is going to work in the future.
A venture capitalist mindset as well, perhaps.
I would be careful about, I just this whole thing around, what works in capitalism and what works in venture capital and what works in IT somehow applies to social systems.
Okay.
I also think you can't use fear. We can't go out of COP terrifying people that actually they've got fear of the future or fear of missing out or fear of the other. What we've got to do is get
that mindset about not fearing. Isn't
It's-
that
it's-
mindset about let's go for it and we'll throw a lot at this and some things will fail?
We, again, the royal we. The we here is not the we in the world. Yes, we need the we, but it's the much bigger we that we've got to get into this conversation. They've got to see the opportunities. There are huge opportunities in this. It's the opportunity for the whole we, and that's a system change conversation.
Definitely, the policymakers are the game changers. It requires, though, the consistency and seeing through and the enforceability, because you may have the best law, the best regulation, but if you don't enforce them, then you don't reach the final result. And the ability to have a well-coordinated and timely action, predictability for the investors. Because any of these solutions we are discussing will not involve one policymaker alone. It will involve Ministry of Energy, Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Industrialization, Ministry of Urbanization, Ministry of Water. So you need to be able to have a system that works well together.
The only thing I would add to that is that the ones who will act at the end is the private sector. So
but they
yes,
can't act without the right policy environment.
I totally agree. So private sector, and maybe we're coming back to the first question about involving the companies in the COP. The private sector is a must, because at the end they are the ones who are going to implement the policies and even test if they are the right ones or not.
Yes, I agree with that. To come up with the right policy, something we don't do enough of is to have a dialogue, I would say, with both the private sector and civil society.
And all parts
before
of
you pass
the
the law and the... Sorry?
Yeah, and I'm just going to, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but we've got a minute and a half left. But I was saying, and all parts of the private sector. And that's what, look, it's not for me to say, it's for you to say. But the bringing in one of the biggest industries the world has ever created after 27 COPs where they weren't invited, is this sense of pragmatism really actually moving us forward or taking us backwards? I'll ask that question to all four of you as well. And at the same time, Angela said a comment before we came on panel, it's like, we need to take some of the outrage out of this as well. And people will be outraged because I spoke to Greta Thunberg, or outraged because I spoke to Darren Woods, or have you. Sometimes the same people, which is very weird. So this sense of pragmatism at this COP as well, has it been a leap forward or a step back? And I'll just work my way down the line because I've pretend got 48 seconds, but Emily's going to, it's you who's got to rush off. But Emily's going to let me have a couple of minutes more, so go ahead.
No, sure. We do believe it's a step forward. When we see what we are doing and our peers in the green zone, we see companies taking commitments, strong commitments on achieving net zero at the right time with the right technology. So we see more private sector commitments coming in the COP, and that was more than the COP27 and even more than COP26 by far, of course. So the answer for me is yes.
Hella?
Yes, definitely. And I want to take this opportunity to say that the private sector is creative and adjusts. So now that there is the carbon border adjustment mechanism coming soon in Europe, and very recently, last week or the week before, they adopted a law that if the gas or the oil is coming from a process that vents and emits a lot of methane, they will not buy it. So that goes back to the policy. But the private sector, when they know the new policy, they adjust. And here I quote one of the largest bankers in Turkey. She said, we are very resilient. Once we know what is the requirement, we will get it done.
Yeah, and Bob, look, it's not the only major thing that you've achieved, but it's certainly the culmination of so much hard work to get oil and gas into the Big Ten as well. You must be very pleased with what you've seen here.
I am very pleased, and I think having it here in the UAE has been a big difference because they want to achieve something, move it forward, but they have the sense of reality that you can't do it without energy companies and oil and gas companies being part of it. So
so this COP is a move forward, yeah?
Big forward, and lots of congratulations. It's not over yet. A lot of things can still happen, but with Dr. Sultan and his leadership.
I'm still hoping for something on 6.4, but that's another conversation for another panel later. I think it'd just be me on that one. And Angela, final words from you.
I hope this is what you might call, we're moving from moonshots to pragmatism shots, right? That pragmatism shot will be seen as an excuse for inertia by a lot of people. I'm just telling you where the narrative will go. But I think we need an empathy shot, because actually this is really about how do we stop a whole set of trends and developments around othering. And we're going to have to work with other people, whether we like them or not, because what's really at stake is the future of humanity. And that means putting differences aside.
Yeah, an empathy shot, a pragmatism shot as well, and taking the outrage out. And Bob, did you want to say one more word?
I was just going to add to what Angela said here. Something has happened in the last 2 years in the world in terms of pragmatism around this. Mm-hmm. There is no silver lining whatever from the invasion of Russia into Ukraine, but it has made the world realize it's not all about affordability and sustainability of energy, it's security of supply. And I think that's what's allowed this COP to actually talk about things. We need security of supply as well. And then you mentioned something that I don't think people even know what you said, the IRA in the United States. It stands for the Inflation Reduction Act, which is kind of a funny name, really, because it doesn't have anything to do with that. But it is marrying up policy and private industry, carrot and stick, providing huge amount of subsidies and investment coming in. A lot of investment from Europe is coming into the United States, which doesn't make Europe very happy. But they actually did it, and the United States is one of the most divided politically countries in the world. But they actually passed this, which tells me that it can be done, policy, and create the incentives for the private industry, and create the penalties if they don't do it.
And there's hope for bipartisanship yet in Congress, maybe. Anyway, we'll leave that one for another. I'm just going to thank you all very quickly. Bob Dudley, always a pleasure. So Angela Wilkinson, love the contribution. Hela Sheikh Ruhu, first time we've met. Thank you very much indeed for everything as well. And Wally Chetta, same. It's been a real pleasure meeting you both. Emma's hovering. I think I might be in trouble. Well, a quick round of applause.
You can stay seated if you want, because I'm just going to say thank you so much for joining us. That kind of wraps up our morning coverage for you. We have a fantastic networking event that's taking place right now downstairs. Lovely canapes, delicious canapes and refreshments. We'd love you to join us. And do keep the conversation going, and check out CNBC Sustainable Future on the CNBC website, because there's lots of really interesting information there. Another round of applause, please.